Let's do it.
Hey, welcome everybody. It's Leon Purton and Tim Boyd at your LinkedIn Live. We're having a chat today about why confidence is usually preparation in disguise. I'd love for you to interact with us. Your comments will appear in the bottom right of the screen. If you do join us today, feel free to throw your comments in there. So why are we talking about confidence? Probably people out there, and if you're listening into this, feel free to put your virtual hand up or just nod along with me. You've probably seen people who seem naturally confident. There's people out there that seem to have this confidence and ease about how they go about in the world. But here's the thing: it's not about personality. It's not about some inbuilt charisma. It's about the work they do behind the scenes to be ready. And I've always noted that this trap that we all fall into, where we compare people's 5-minute highlight reel with our hundreds of hours of hard work. And it's really difficult to break that mindset. So, what we're going to try and do today is talk a little bit about how you can be more confident, what it really looks like to be prepared. And joining me today is the great Tim Boyd, joining from the South Coast in San Diego. No, you're in LA, Tim.
Los Angeles, yeah.
Yeah, Los Angeles. So Tim's a strategist, a program leader. He's worked across multi-discipline programs, and he's seen people succeed and seen people struggle with their confidence. Tim's seen it fail at the worst of times, and he's seen people's preparation pull through and be successful by the end of it. Tim, over to you. Anything else you'd like to add?
No, I mean, I've led a bunch of large organizations of teams, and I've seen the evolution of confidence, right? Some people come in and they're just brand new or they're new to the arena. And it's nice to kind of actually be able to articulate and tell stories of, as you look at people with confidence, sometimes you just think I have a long ways to go, but you might just be right on the cusp of about to turn the corner. And all you need is a little bit more or something, a small adjustment, and you're off and running. So a lot of those hopefully we'll be able to unearth today in today's conversation.
Great. Thanks for joining us, Nucha. I love to have you on board. So, well, I mentioned at the start that confidence is normally people assume it's some type of trait. It's inbuilt. People have it or you don't. What we're actually seeing in that is that generally that's the output, not the input. It's the thing that people have generated over time, the hours of preparation, the rehearsal, the experiences that are positively reinforced or negatively reinforced that they've learned throughout the day. I have seen it over time. I've seen people struggle with this self-confidence element. They struggle because they don't have the right frameworks around them to grow that confidence. Today, we're going to build on that. So, Tim, tell me what it looks like. What does confidence actually look like from the inside? And what's the difference between confidence and the performance of confidence?
The difference between confidence and the performance of confidence. That's an interesting one. So to me, what confidence feels like inside, right? If I'm up there, I'm giving a talk or doing something, and I'm feeling confident in it, you're not really stressed. There's no second questioning or second guessing your analysis or the way you're saying something or the words you're using. Either they're naturally flowing or you've rehearsed the heck out of it, and you know exactly what you want to say and how you want to say it. And so that's what it looks like to me, the confidence. And a lot of that, like you said, is built around a significant amount of hours behind the scenes in preparation for those activities. Now, some people are just naturally gifted at basically looking at a picture of rock and being able to explain the system engineering V to other people. And it's just bizarre to me how they can do those things without any preparation whatsoever. But that's a very far and few in between number of people. So the second question about confidence and the performance of confidence, a lot of people I think are confident. I think a lot of times, and I will say unrightfully so. Sometimes people are confident in their own abilities. Think about the Peter Principle, which is you're going to rise to the level in the organization, given your own ineptitude and things like that. So some people are overconfident. And so that is just generally, if you have confidence, that's great. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can act on it and you can apply that in the real world and perform with that same level of confidence, because sometimes you'll get second questioned, you'll get second guessed by people, and you won't have an opportunity to be able to defend yourself because your confidence is really just surface level, and it's not, I said a well earned or deep down, like I mentioned before, all the hours you put in behind the scenes to make sure that everything else is smooth along the way. So that's what I would say, Leon. I think that's a reasonable approach in how I view confidence.
Yeah, I think there's a mantra analogy that I'm a Leonism, and maybe that I'm particularly fond of. Not sure where I picked it up from, but my belief, confidence needs evidence is the term that I always use. So if you're thinking about what you're trying to achieve, what's the outcome you're trying to achieve, how do you generate the evidence to get to a point where you feel confident in developing it? So for me, that's the heart of what we talk about in preparation. And if you use a simple physical example, people might not have very much confidence in being able to do 10 pull-ups, as an example. But if you've done enough practice and generated enough evidence that you could reliably do 10 pull-ups, then when the time comes when you've got to perform and generate those outcomes, it's easy for you to generate an outcome where you can do 10 pull-ups because you've got evidence that you can do it. And that's the difference. The same thing goes in your professional life. Now, some people are naturally better orators than others. Some people can talk to problems a lot more proficiently than some people feel. But generally that comes because of mental models or frameworks or practice that people have put in to generate the evidence that they can thrive in those scenarios. Mm-hmm. So what does it actually look like, Tim? Imagine that you're taking on something new in the workplace. What does preparation for confidence actually look like in practice?
Yeah, for me, practice is a lot of hours behind the scenes. Really making sure I break everything down to the fundamental pieces, understanding all the gory details as best as I can, asking myself questions that maybe, someone like my daughter, I would have to explain something to, but breaking it down into very bite-sized pieces of information that I can then go investigate, absorb, and understand, and then I move on to the next one. Kind of the systems thinking model or mindset, as you're well aware. But making sure that you take all the individual pieces and not try to boil the ocean. So asking simple questions and going step by step, question by question, until you effectively have, I will say, a baseline foundation for what you're trying to do, and then you can slowly build on that foundation. You need that baseline set of, I will say, data and information in order for you to kind of get your feet on steady ground. Otherwise, you're going to be faltering and you're not going to have any level of confidence in that next step. So the first goal is to get your feet on stable ground and then slowly start taking steps up that ladder or up that hill or mountain, whatever you're on. And then at some point, you'll be able to see a little bit above the tree line, and then further and further, you'll be able to start seeing the big picture. And I think that's how I typically approach it when I take on a new assignment or I lock a new speaking gig or whatever it is. Okay, this is what we need to do. Slowly build up the foundations, build the frameworks, build the skeleton, start filling in pieces of information, and then the narrative starts to inform or starts to form. And I think that's the ultimate goal. It's not like the traditional artists you hear, they have this major inspiration in the middle of the night and they go to the piano and then knock it out in 15 minutes. That's not how I work. I'm not that gifted, but sometimes you do get those moments of inspiration where you can really knock something out, at least get pretty darn close within a span of a couple hours if you're locked in. And that's, to me, the ultimate zone that you want to be in. But those do come far and few in between a lot of times, but they are fascinating when those moments do hit.
Yeah, you hit that flow state. You and I both have public speaking gigs, Tim, that we do. It's one of the things that really, for me, the level of outcome or performance that you have in those moments in public speaking gigs is almost always defined by the level of preparation that you've put in to get ready of it. You recently did a speaking gig to a whole heap of project management professionals. Can you talk me through a little bit about I know you just detailed it then, but let's get specific here. What did you actually do in preparation for that project management talk that you did?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was a great talk. I think you're talking about the one about the dad jokes and deadlines, which is a lot of fun.
Exactly the one.
Um,
Yeah.
that one was fascinating, mainly because it was a very personal story, and it was a very personal narrative that I put together. And so, while it hit really close to home, I wanted to do a really strong justice, and I needed an opportunity to take these personal stories that I was having directly with a 6-year-old and translate it to project professionals who were adults, and give them something that they could take away with. So when I first started out, it was all built around this central idea of a simple conversation I had with my daughter, and then from there, I started going into all the details and all the conversations that we've had and all the things that I've learned from her over the last, say 3 or 4 years, and really trying to extract out the lesson from that. So obviously that takes time. You have these great moments in your interaction with your children, and at some point you either have a very fond, positive memory, or a very, I will say, struggling memory because maybe you didn't do it the right way, or you didn't work through that situation the way you maybe should have, or whatever it may be. And so you have these positive and negatives, and so trying to flow through that. So number one was really all about, let's build the foundation, the bookends. Let's start with this story, and then let's come up with 3 or 4 or 5 other stories that we can actually build in here and make sure that they all flow together. And so once I had those stories, then it's about how do I communicate those stories and those narratives along with it. So starting with each story, and then do I want to have a lot of bullets on the slide, or do I want to have just a couple of bullets on the slide and really just communicate almost like a
Yeah.
keynote in terms of the story? And then so once I had all that in plan, I said I want to go simple on this particular one. Talk to a picture, talk to a couple lines, integrate those into the narrative. But then the last piece, it still felt a little disparate and kind of just plugged together like an awkward jigsaw puzzle. And so I needed to seamlessly transition and have everything connected in the full narrative. And that was the final piece. And I think once that final piece came together, it was like the cherry on top, if you will. It was just the chef's kiss that just allowed it to flow smooth. And but that preparation took almost weeks to get that fully
Yeah.
engaged and fully ready. So
Yeah.
I would say at least, you know, 50 hours or whatever, maybe some ballpark around there to go through the whole process, practice the narrative, etc., and not necessarily reading from a script per se, but really understanding here's what I want to do and how I want to talk through it, but making sure those bridges were actually there. And to me, those simple preparation points can be the most impactful on the audience if it's seamlessly transitioning and everything kind of comes back and flows back together at the end of the day.
So I think there's certain threads there that most people will acknowledge as key points to preparation. Like there's this, outlining, building it up, practicing, rehearsing, reviewing the rehearsals, trying to improve it over time. Those things always generally lead to more confidence in what you're trying to do. What are some of the things, Tim, that people try and do that perhaps they falsely believe give them confidence? Things like one of the things I'm confident don't usually help people prepare that much are the types of like positive affirmations or some self pep talks or type things like that that don't actually help you be more confident by the end of it. It's a false sense of security going to the event. Anything else stand out to you?
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned the power of positivity. I mean, I know that's a great book. I mean, I get the idea and the validation that people get from being positive, and it's supposed to drive you to have actions, right? But the way that it typically is communicated in today's world is that be positive and great things will happen. Where really what they're trying to say is be positive and you will actually make conscious choices that will then enable good things to happen in your life. And so that's really what it comes down to, but it still takes an action from you along the way. So I think some of the things I've seen is, you could talk about all the basic things, do a power pose or deep breaths and all the other kind of stuff. There's certain things that I do sometimes before a really big presentation or an interview or something like that to get myself settled and in the zone. And
Yeah.
that definitely works for me. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for everybody. But I will say that what I see a lot of people do, and I don't think it works very well at all, is that they have a script. They have a script that they've written out because
Yeah.
that makes them very confident that they aren't going to lose their place, but they end up just leaning on that heavily as a crutch and they just read from the script. And even if they don't, you can tell they're reading from the script because they haven't
Yeah.
rehearsed it or they haven't built in the right transitions or the intonations and the tone of voice and all that. So that's one of the big ones that I see a lot with people in these moments. And it's gotten more awkward when it comes to the virtual sessions because you can't always tell. But sometimes you can tell with the genuineness of the presenter and how you go through that as well. But let's see, some other things that falsely give people confidence, I think in general, is always trying to figure out how well you're doing from the audience. I think on the virtual sessions it's almost impossible because a lot of times people don't know, so you lose that aspect of it. And if you're
Yeah.
trying to solely rely on that, it's hard. In person it's probably a little bit easier, but a lot of times people got poker face and they won't tell you how you're connecting or how well you're doing. And I've been in great talks, honestly, Leon, where I felt really good engagement from the audience, but the audience just afterwards, it's kind of gave me like a, that was all right. It wasn't like
Yeah.
groundbreaking,
Yeah.
but you were laughing and having a great time and seemed to be connecting. And other times they're just very monotone and they don't say anything and you can't tell. And they're like, oh, this is the best thing ever. And so
Yeah.
you lose some of that. But I think some of those things I would say are kind of two of the big ones that I see, relying on external input to kind of give you that confidence, but also just trying to rely solely on something you've built in advance and not being in the moment and adjusting on the fly.
Yeah. If you're listening in, feel free to drop in the comment. What's one of the things that you've done that's actually built your confidence? Not what you were told to do, but something you did and it helped you build your confidence. Drop it in the comments. Love to see what you've got going on. I remember I had a manager early in my corporate career, Tim, who kept a preparation journal. So just the few minutes each morning, she'd have a look at her calendar and have a look at the engagements that she had each day and take a few notes about the mindset that she wanted to take into each of those engagements and what some of the key points she wanted to make sure she covered in those engagements. She just wrote it down, just the first 15 minutes of every day. Would just time block that out and then have a look at all of the engagements she had planned for the day and write it in a little journal. And then just the few seconds before she engaged in that next meeting or jumped from meeting to meeting, she'd review that preparation journal. And that was a method for her to help manage her interaction, her confidence, define the outcomes that she wanted to get across. And I was always fascinated by how well she managed the room. I'd be sitting in the room and the conversation would be going this way and then she'd pull it back and then we'd move in this direction again. It really showed a real mastery inside the room. And it wasn't a year or so later when I talked to her about how she helped manage that, she talked me through her preparation journal and to get ready for that. Is there anything that you've seen, Tim, where, some people have shown you real ways to demonstrate and show confidence in moments?
Oh man. I don't have a great story like that where someone showed me their journal and the preparation. I know that a lot of times in today's world, a lot of times people actually wait to the last minute to prepare. So that's a big deal, and people don't do it the right way. I do like the idea though of this mindset and understanding that. I think preparing for any sort of talk, right, whether it's this is the mindset I need to be in, this is the scope of the conversation, or generally this is what I want to get across and make my points known. I have had quite a bit of those in my conversations with various leaders in my corporate career to talk about, okay, this is the line we want to walk in this meeting, and we can't deviate from that. We have to come back, etc. So there's things of that nature. But I think I will just offer for myself one of the big things that I like to do immediately in advance of the meeting, or the big discussion or the big presentation, is I like to um, take a moment and I take some deep breaths. There's a specific song I also play in my headphones, and I zone in for the 5 or 6 minutes
Give
of the
me. No,
song.
you can't just drop a hint like that, Tim. What song is it?
It's from Ludovici Einaudi. It's called Experience. It's the most incredible song I think I've heard in terms of hyping somebody up. It's really this crescendo at the end through the entire 5 minutes, and it gets to this point where at the end of it, all I have to tell myself is, "You've got this. They invited you here for a reason, and it's your show." And every time I have this really big moment, I always do the same thing and remind myself,
There you go.
"This is your moment. this, and I've been doing this for over almost 15 years now in these big moments, but there's certain moments that are still really big, and I still do this to this day. I just did it yesterday for a big meeting that I had. So so I think being able to center and ground yourself and kind of settle yourself is a really powerful thing. And again, you have to find what works for you. Some people like to just jump from meeting to meeting to meeting, and then they're ready to go. They could just easily compartmentalize. But for
Yeah.
me, I need some time in advance to settle everything down.
We're both leadership uh, uh, motivated people, Tim. We try and strive and thrive in helping people get the best out of the people around them. And I want to take this from the sort of the micro to the macro. So let's
Sure.
scale it up, right? Let's talk about transitioning from developing confidence in yourself to developing confidence in your team and the people around you. So, maybe someone's looking unconfident in your team. Well, maybe you might think, what's wrong with them? But maybe a better question is, what have I failed to give them? So can you talk a little bit about what you have done in the past as a leader when you've noticed somebody being slightly unconfident or second guessing themselves to help build up their confidence?
Yeah, no, it happens quite a bit, and especially when you're leading the larger organizations that you lead. I will say, unfortunately, the more opportunity you get to evaluate this as you go through it. A lot of times, what I see is in some of the junior staff that support, our programs and so forth. We have these people come in and they obviously want to do really well. I think everyone in our organizations just wants to do as good of a job as possible, but they also want to make an impact and make good waves and impression on leadership as well. So they will do everything they possibly can, but they won't necessarily, I will say, make the big decision without second guessing themselves a lot of the way. And a lot of the times they'll have to get a lot of feedback and guidance from everyone else. And sometimes that's challenging. So what I always like to tell people is that, look, you've done the analysis, right? You've already evaluated, done the trade study, et cetera. So why do you need additional input from everyone else, right? You're owning this decision, et cetera, and you should be able to, clarify and execute on this decision. So like, what's preventing us from moving forward here when it comes down to it? I've empowered you to do that. So a lot of times people, and at least in my experience, they don't feel empowered fully. And so whenever you're delegating something or making sure someone knows that this is their opportunity, making sure that you're delegating the full authority or responsibility to that person and making that very clear. I trust you 100% with this, and obviously doing it once they're ready to go. But I think that really gives them a true opportunity to see it end to end, and that
Yeah.
is one great way to build their confidence. Otherwise, I think making sure that people have those opportunities to shine. I've seen a lot of times in meetings where the junior folks in the room, they try to start saying something and they just kind of get shut down or overruled by somebody else. And I usually stop the meetings if it's someone on my team specifically and say, no, 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 I want to hear what this person has to say. So I have a platform of privilege, Leon. I think you and I've talked about this before. And I do think that many other people don't have the same opportunities or that same platform that we have. So giving someone else an opportunity to stand on your platform
Yeah.
to articulate their words and their perspectives is probably one of the biggest things you can do as a leader to build confidence in other people. And showing that you care is really a big thing for someone else as well. So those are some of the things that I try to do, giving them opportunity, helping them understand that, hey, you've already got everything you need. You shouldn't continue to second guess yourself, and then making sure that you give them an opportunity to articulate those thoughts, even when other people might be pushing them away.
Yeah. One of the things I talk about in my keynote, Tim, is try to ask, don't tell.
Mm.
And so whenever you can as a leader, try and spin the dial from telling people what to do to asking them what they think they should do. And what that does, it self validates people's thinking and preparation. So if you are, hey boss, I don't know what to do here. Well, if you ask them, what do you think needs to be done, instead of by just telling them what they think they need to do, they come up with the idea themselves. They then better own the outcomes. When that outcome moves them forward and they come back to you to talk about the next thing to do, it develops their confidence along the way. So
Right.
let's talk about ask, don't tell where you can. Sometimes it's time critical, some maybe it's safety critical, whatever it might need to be, and you need to tell people. But where you can, try and spin that dial from tell towards ask, and you'll find yourself being a far more productive leader, generating more leadership capacity around you.
I do
The other
like
thing,
that,
Tim, I found is that some people feel like they lack confidence because they can't answer questions live. So there's some mental models that I introduced, and I'll talk to those in a little bit, that help people orient themselves to the question and give a coherent answer afterwards. And that helps build confidence along the way. But what have you seen in the moment where people are struggling? They fumble around, they don't feel like they're talking properly, and that negatively impacts their confidence about the knowledge they have. What's some tips that you might have for people in those scenarios?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll tell you a quick story before we get down there. This was probably about, I want to say like 15 or 16 years ago or something like that. I was at this technical conference, and I was briefing some material that I knew really well. It was my analysis and my program and my test that I had run, and I was briefing to the community. This is what the output was, etc. And I knew the material. I put together charts. I did the analysis. I built the test from scratch, etc. So I knew all the technical stuff. Where I struggled at that point in time was the questions and answering those questions live, like you mentioned, because I can only think about X number of questions that people would offer in that live session. So what happened is that whenever I was on stage, someone asked me a question, and I didn't know. I didn't know how to answer the question, and so I delegated to someone else in the audience who was an expert in my team, and they answered the question, which was great. But it was in that moment I realized that, hey, if I'm going to make this a thing, I can't keep doing that. I need to make this transition into answering questions live. So what I've learned to do is that instead of trying to answer right away, like you said, and start fumbling around in the answer, take a second. Either if you are around a table or a meeting or a conference, whatever, maybe you can write down the question, or even repeat the question back to make sure you have the right essence of the question you're answering. Number one, that buys you a little bit more time, but also puts it in helps you reframe it in a way that maybe makes more sense to you. And if you can get that validation, then you can move forward from there. After you've clarified, take a beat, right? Think about and articulate some starting of an answer. And usually all it takes is just a couple seconds for you to start thinking, okay, I want to take it down this path or this road. And then once you start down that path, you're already in that direction. You're not over here on left field going towards village X. You're actually over moving in the right direction. And I found that is one of the best ways to do that. So take a moment, or reframe the question and rearticulate the question if you can, and take a breath and take a few moments to gather your thoughts and then start answering. Because if you don't do that, you'll just ramble. And like you said, it can have negative impacts on your overall confidence because you realize that you're not articulating it very well. And when you're in those moments as well, it's much more likely that you're going to lose your train of thought and drift away from the question so that you're going to forget what the actual question was.
I've seen a few times, Tim, that people actually ask a question, but they want the answer to the question behind the question.
Oh, yeah.
So they might ask you, can you tell me about this thing here? They're not actually interested in that thing here. They're interested in how that thing interacts with this other thing that they've already got a mental model of in their head. So sometimes I actually ask people that back. I'm like, I hear you asking this question. Is that the answer you want? Or is there another question that's going to follow on behind this and maybe I can answer them both at the same time or something like that, so that you don't get, because you can answer that question and go down this path and then they jump you straight over to some other point which wasn't anything that you covered previously, and it derails you and makes you feel out of balance and off track. The other two tips that I give to the people that I interact with around preparing and responding in moments is that sometimes you just need a mental model, Tim. And one of the ones that I utilize a lot is what now? So somebody might ask you a question, can you tell me when this thing is going to be delivered? Well, the thing we're working on is this. It's in this phase of delivery right now, which means it'll be ready at this point in time. So what now? It's a real simple mental model that helps give people a framework to hold on to in their mind and work through this response to the question. The second one is situation complication resolution. So it's not that different from what now, but the situation is we're in this phase of delivery. We are ready for this thing here right now, but here's this complication. We've come up against this problem. We're working through a resolution of it right now. We expect that resolution will take us 2 weeks, and I'll provide an update for you in the week after. Something like that is another mental model that helps people come through. The last point that I wanted to raise on, we'll get to your questions in a second. They're great questions. We've talked about the micro self-confidence. We've talked about scaling that up to developing confidence in other people. Last one I want to talk to you about, Tim, is developing confidence in groups of people. So in teams, how do you scale developing confidence up to a point where the team has confidence in the direction you're going, the team has confidence in talking to the problems or issues or outcomes that you're trying to achieve? How do you scale that confidence from confidence in yourself to confidence in other individuals to confidence as a team?
That's a great question. How do you scale confidence from, let's say, yourself or individual, maybe your vision, into kind of inspiring and motivating your team to move forward and be able to execute as well? That's the gist of the question. Is that correct?
Yep.
So I think some of the things that I would articulate in those moments, if I'm trying to motivate and inspire confidence in the team, number one, I think the very first step is you have to be able to articulate the why. Why are we doing something, as opposed to just, we're going to go do this? Because if people are just seemingly thinking this is a transactional moment where you're just asking them to do more stuff, and you're not exactly telling them what the value is or the impact it's going to have, etc., then they're less likely going to, I will say, not to be confident, but really want to do it in general. So if you can actually be transformational and talk about, this is why we have to do this, guys, and then this is the ultimate steps that we want to take and direction we need to go in order for us this to be successful. I think number one, that's going to motivate, inspire, and give people the confidence that, hey, we're doing this for a reason, and everything that we're doing along the way is a stepping stone that's going to come back and really build on the end goal here, and that's a big deal. So I think that's the biggest thing that I would talk about. But the scaling as well is very similar to what I started out with talking about when it comes to taking a very systematic approach to scaling confidence and so forth, or building confidence. It's really all about starting with kind of these key stakeholders in your teams and in your organizations, and not necessarily trying to do it all at once. You can't, while you can have a moment of inspiration and motivation in, let's say, an all hands meeting, you're not going to drastically increase the confidence of 200 people in a single meeting, and that's not going to sustain over the course of time. So you have to have these, I will call them agents of change inside your organization, that they have to be on board with your idea as well. Motivate, inspire, and build that confidence in them, and allow them to help you continue your message and push it through the organization to continue to be your cheerleaders and motivations as a part of that. And I've seen that work really well, especially when you're talking about large scale of growth that has to happen, whether it's confidence, whether it's motivation, or whatever it may be. All that is a really, really good endeavor to take as an approach.
They're great points, Tim. One amplification or thing I'll add on it is, I'll borrow from medical terminology. Everybody's heard of post-mortems or after action reviews, when something happens and you do a review at the end about what went well and what didn't go well. And you can generate confidence from that learning loop that you build into systems. Something that I've tried to introduce in certain programs and projects, doesn't work every time, but in some of them, is what I call a pre-mortem, where you put on the table, hey, we're about to do this phase of the project, and it's we've gone forward in time and it's been a massive failure. Nothing's worked. It's been a massive failure. Tell me why this phase of the program failed, or this phase of the project failed. And people will tell you everything that's on their mind that they're not comfortable with. And then you can work through mitigation strategies, work out if they're real risks or perceived risks. You can mitigate those. And then you can work through, as a team, developing from this, starting in a negative position to build positive confidence. And so it doesn't work in every situation, but it is a technique that I've used previously. A couple of questions here from the audience. So I've got some thoughts on it, but what's one habit you've found that helps people become more confident over time, Tim?
Yeah, so great question, Nietzsche. I would say Number one is take a small task, whatever task you're doing, and really just make a small incremental progress on it. There was an interview I remember with Stephen King a long time ago, and someone was asking Stephen King and said, "Hey, how do you write so many great, best-selling novels?" And he said, "100 crappy words a day." That's all he said.
Yeah.
He said,
Yeah.
"All you got to do is write out 100 words a day, whether they're valuable or not." And at some point, you're going to have so many words out there and so many things that there's going to be nuggets of greatness in there as well. So I think from a daily habit perspective, just do something every single day to get better at one specific thing. And over time, it's going to compound just like the nominal compound interest, et cetera. But they say the 1% rule, get better 1% every day on something. And then that's going to be the ultimate growth, the module for you.
Yeah. I often think about when I contemplate identity, Tim, identity is a series of habits that you do that reinforces your identity, right? And so if I'm trying to develop a habit or a part of my identity that is self-confidence, right? I'm going to imagine this metaphorical jar that sits on the counter. And every time I walk past it each day, I want to put a vote into the jar for that part of my identity I want to form. And so if being more self-confident is part of the identity that I want to form, then I need to think about what I can do each day. Like you say, just one thing. Stephen King's story is great. In fact, that's how I wrote my book. I set myself this intention just to read, write, and exercise every day. That was the identity that I wanted to build for the year that I was writing my book. And so I just put a vote in each day. And sometimes that meant 100 shitty words. Sometimes it meant reviewing 3 pages from the last day that I wrote. Sometimes it meant researching good stories or pieces of information that might need to make it into the book. But it was a daily habit that I did. And the same thing goes for self-confidence. Set yourself a challenge of calling somebody and talking to them about something that's been on your mind. Get up on at the front of the meeting and introduce people to the room. Just let them know where the emergency exits and the toilets are, whatever it might be. If you're trying to get better at it, just do one daily thing you can each day to put a vote in that bucket and that jar into the new identity you're trying to form.
Absolutely. And I will say that even though you and I've been doing this for quite some time, and we're fairly confident in a lot of things we do, I'm always still trying new things and trying new ways to continue to build that confidence, and also not necessarily just confidence in myself, but connecting with the audience in different ways, right? So, I mean, for example, one of the things I typically do is actually had a session not too long ago where I had to go brief the interns. The interns were here, and there was about 50 interns in the room, and we're on this panel format where we're all staring awkwardly at the interns, and they're all just doing their thing. But I walked around the room and I just started talking to each one of them before the event, just to kind of help calm them down and make them a little bit more comfortable, and let them know that, hey, I'm an approachable person. I'm not just some senior leader here in the organization that is someone you can't really talk to. So I went and talked to them and found out some great things about some of these folks, and just kind of softened that distance, if you will, and increase the connection between people. And that's the ultimate goal as speakers and engagers that we need to do. So even those things, continue to try to find new ways all the time of enhancing those connections between people, whether it's giving a talk in a different way, or like you said, trying a different approach when it comes to building a talk or whatever it may be. It's always going to be slightly different, and you have to just make incremental progress every day in some form or fashion. Otherwise, you might go crazy and you become the king or queen of procrastination.
Yeah. So true. The next question for Nucha: how do you know when someone needs encouragement when they need to trust themselves?
Why don't you take that one first? I want to hear your thoughts on that one, actually.
Great. Yeah. Well, I think it does come a little bit back to the connection part, Tim. I think the real undervalued skill in leadership is getting a sense of the person that you're working with, not the professional. So I always talk to my team about you work with people, not email signature blocks, right? So you need to know who the person is, not just what they do. I mean, it helps you to know that people are SharePoint experts or great at developing Gantt charts, or they're the person you need to go to when you need to understand this particular subsystem or part of the program or project that you're working on. That's in their signature block. But it's better when you know, I need to go talk to Sally, who's our SharePoint expert. And she taught herself SharePoint when she was working at the local sporting club and had to develop their point of sale software for their social club, right? So that's a very different interaction that you have with somebody then. And then once you get to that level of connection, you can start to understand when people need validation that they are doing the right thing. And that's that type of encouragement. Hey, yes, you're on the right path, keep moving. Or when you instead need to do that ask instead of tell, which I mentioned earlier in the conversation. Well, actually, I think you understand that you know what to do here. What do you think you need to do next? Right. And that's that gentle push that can still be encouragement. So that first part of that sentence is encouragement. I think you know what you need to do next. The gentle push is you tell me what you think you need to do. And that will start to develop that self-awareness, self-trust, self-efficacy, their ability, their self-belief that they can get things done.
Right.
Tim, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so my thoughts are a lot of times people will come to me with a perspective. They're working on something maybe for me, et cetera, and it's like, hey, this is kind of what I've come up with already. I want to get your thoughts on, how well I'm doing on this, or am I on the right track, et cetera. And that's a traditional way to go about doing it. That's great. And so when I look at some of these things, technically it's extremely sound. I mean, the narrative is there. It's technically sound. It's really good. And so a lot of times that's when I recognize that they're not fully trusting themselves. And so what I will typically ask them in those moments is, okay, I see what you put together. Why don't you tell me about the process in which you did to create this artifact or this detail, right? What did you go through, right? What was your mindset? What was your approach to making this happen? Where did you get the data and all that stuff? Why do you believe this is the right approach? And so, like you said, helping them understand that, hey, I've done all this work and I've done the analysis, I've done the preparation, and I've actually built the same story that aligns with that. Sometimes it's all they need to say, hey, okay, I should be trusting myself a little bit more along the way. And the other thing that sometimes I like to ask people is, what have you tried that didn't work? And a lot of times
Right.
you'll find is that they've done so many things that didn't work. So they try to have a pivot. And I said, look, sounds like you've already exhausted the majority of things that I typically would do. So I think that you're on the right track here and you should keep going down the direction you're already gone. So I think giving them that confidence of, hey, okay, not just the validation that Tim said it was okay, but the secondary piece of Tim seems to think that he helped me understand that I've already done a ton of work and a tremendous
Yeah.
amount of effort leading up to this. So, as the title of this session is aligned, it's the confidence is usually that preparation in disguise. So, they should be much more confident in their overall ability because of the amount of preparation and analysis that's already gone into the artifact.
Yeah. So good. As we're going to wrap up soon, I'd be interested for you all listening in at home or wherever you are to put a comment in. What was the most valuable or important thing from today's conversation for you? What was the thing that you're going to take away from today's conversation? And Tim, I'll throw to you now to do a bit of a reflection. What do you think
Sure.
is your most valuable thing from today's conversation?
Yeah, I think it was one of the first things you said, Leon. I think one of the most powerful things that, or at least I think it was the way you said it, and it's that confidence needs evidence. I love that triplet right there, specifically because evidence can mean a lot of things, but it's not just, hey, it needs hard work and preparation. It's not necessarily that, but the evidence that says, hey, you can do this, so you have to trust yourself to make it happen. Right. The reason I kind of came up with this ideally, and I'll tell you the story, is that I was actually at the Magic Castle here in LA, which is the best magicians in the world. And these
Yeah.
magicians, they're just up there doing all this incredible stuff, and it's just blowing your mind away. But that they've spent decades perfecting these
Yeah.
tricks and these ideas and these 5 second, 10 second, 20-second moments to make you believe what they're doing is real. And that is what I thought about this confidence. They are 100% confident all the time in everything that they're doing. And that's what I loved that's what I love about magic. And that's why I love going to these types of shows. And I said,
Yeah.
okay, well, we can extrapolate that and talk about leadership and everything else. And so confidence is really a whole lot of a lot goes into confidence, but it definitely needs that evidence to have your own internal barometer say, I can actually make this happen and I can actually do this myself. So.
Yeah, great. For me, Tim, it was the moment you talked about Stephen King and 100 crappy words a day. I think so much of confidence comes down to daily evidence. I know I spoke to you about evidence before, but if you can start to make it part of your identity that you are a writer, the way you do that is you write 100 crappy words a day. If you want to be more confident at work, work out what habits you need to work on. Maybe even talk to your leader, boss, mentor inside of your workplace and help them reframe for you what you need to work on to become more confident. And often it is a mindset. It's the way that you approach things. It's how you think about it. I think that small, you use Nietzsche, great stuff. The small, consistent daily habits, putting a vote in the jar each day will help you become more confident over time. Thanks, Tim. We're going to wrap up now. It's been great chatting to you again. Some of my favorite time is spent talking to you about things relating to leadership, Tim. Something we're going to continue to try and do regularly, maybe not super frequently, but regularly. And I just want to reinforce that takeaway is confidence is usually preparation in disguise. Confidence needs evidence. Tim, any closing thoughts from you before we wrap up for today?
I think that if you're all listening here, I think one of the things that you can do justice for yourself is just to figure out what you need to get better at or what you want to get better at, and just make that small incremental progress. Choose progress over, I'll call it laziness. That's not right. But choose progress over no progress, and make sure that you are incrementally getting better every single day in some form or fashion. Because at the end of the day, you're going to wake up and it's going to be 10 years from now, and you'll either wasted the time or you will have invested the time, and you're going to be much better off, at least in a single skill, than you were 10 years ago. So go forth and conquer, my friends.
Great stuff, Tim. And if this landed for you today, share it with someone you might think needs to hear it. The replay will be still on LinkedIn and YouTube that we'll be able to get to. I'll do some follow-up posts about this to try and reinforce some of the key points that Tim and I have spoken about. Feel free to continue to comment on this post. Tim and I will get back to you as we can. Thanks so much for joining us for Confidence is Usually Preparation in Disguise. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you. I look forward to these chats all the time. And I will look forward to us coming up with a new topic. And if you've got any ideas for a new topic for Tim and I to cover, feel free to drop those in the chat section as well. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Leon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.